Tyrion is a
Du spelar ett spel du inte förstår dig på.
Vi kommer inte kunna skydda din kontakt om vi går vidare med det här. Då sätter vi dit alla.
Ja, det utgår jag ifrån.
In their own right. Great horror.
We have such sights to show you.
Hellraiser. Every Hellraiser film explained in detail, and what is the future of the franchise. Hellraiser films are considered by many as the best and the longest horror series ever, but there are those who find issues with the lack of diversity in the plot of the subsequent sequels, or those who complain about the budgetary restraints that plague the film. However, no true horror fan will disagree that Clive Barker's 1987 film was anything short of a classic. And although the sequels may not have been as good as the first film, they are good horror films in their own right. Great horror films like The Thing and Candyman were based on short stories or novellas, and Hellraiser follows suit. Clive Barker wrote the novella The Hellbound Heart in 1986, and soon he was directing a film based on his own piece of literature. It was his revolutionary style of storytelling that made the film's characters and the monsters so intriguing. Cenobites are demonic entities from another labyrinth-like hellish realm that Leviathan rules. Leviathan is the god of flesh and pleasure, and all Cenobites see flesh as an object of craft, something that should be worked on to create pieces of art. They exist to serve their master and protect his labyrinth, which is undeniably similar to Hell. The Cenobites can be considered as demons who work at the behest of their leader named Pinhead. These demons travel between different realms in search of carnal pleasure via a portal or a puzzle box named the Lament Configuration. The most fascinating fact about this box is that whenever someone uses it, the Cenobites appear and try to subject the person to otherworldly pleasures. But this pleasure seems like gruesome torture to weak humans. This paradoxical nature makes it difficult to conclude if they are angelic or demonic. For instance, they're angels to people who love sadomasochism, but they are demonic to others. However, Pinhead likes to believe that he's just an explorer of different realms.
Who are you? Explorers.
He describes himself and his friends as explorers who seek to discover novel types of pleasure and pain, and they've reached such a stage of hedonism that pain and pleasure have become one and the same thing for them. However, as the series progressed, the Cenobites became more like biblical demons who punished the sinners. By the 10th movie, there were references to concepts like the Ten Commandments and the Judgment Day. After Clive Barker, if there's one man who added to the success of the franchise, it has to be Doug Bradley, the man who played Pinhead in the first 8 films. His presence itself was a pull factor for the viewers. Let's deep dive into all the 10 Hellraiser films to understand the plots and understand what makes these movies cult classics. Having said that, we'd also discuss the few red flags that came up over time. So folks, get your toys and enter your red rooms because we're going to have one hell of a sadomasochistic thrill ride. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Hellraiser, 1987. Frank Cotton buys a mysterious puzzle box from a dealer in Morocco. Later, when Frank manages to solve the puzzle, hooks and chains emerge from thin air and tear him apart. After this gruesome carnage, the room is left with several swinging chains and the bloody remains of Frank's body. Soon a figure in black robes appears in the room and he restores Frank's puzzle box to its original state, and the room surprisingly becomes like it was before Frank solved the puzzle. Frank had a small affair with the wife of his brother Larry just before Larry and Julia got married. Despite being married to Larry, Julia still had feelings for Frank. One day, Larry cut his hand in a minor accident and the blood dripped from his hand and into the attic floor. As soon as this happened, Frank's body resurrected in the form of a skinless human figure. Julia finds the seemingly undead Frank, and because of her feelings for him, she agrees to help him with whatever he required. Frank explains to Julia that in order to regain his former self, he has to consume the life out of dying humans.
The blood brought me this far. I need more.
Frank had exhausted all forms of sensual pleasures and sought new arenas of sexual and physical gratification. To achieve this, he sought the help of the puzzle box, which was the doorway to another reality where one could experience extreme carnal pleasures. When the puzzle is solved, demonic beings named Cenobites appear. Julia picks up men from bars and brings them to her house so that Frank can consume them. After she mortally wounds them by stabbing them, Frank sinks his hand into the wounds of the dying men to rejuvenate himself. This continues until Larry's daughter Kirsty suspects Julie.
Casting Natural Gloss, your drama-free hair color with dramatic shine by L'Oreal Paris.
Hello, everyone. It's time to play a game.
Hello, chicken nugget. So I've already filmed an intro for this, but I did not like it, so I'm doing it again. Now, I may not be able to tell you why I am such a fashion icon, but what I am here to tell you about today is the lovely, big-bosomed, curvaceous, and voluptuous Venus figurines that have been around for millennia.
Extraordinary story of how the terror of satanic witchcraft.
This channel is part of the History Hit Network.
Infected the British Isles and plunged it into chaos.
Celebrations of the summer solstice date back to some of the earliest known civilizations. Stonehenge was estimated to have been built around 2500 BCE, and while its purpose is unknown, it is speculated to be an ancient solar calendar, as the entrance faces the rising sun on the day of summer solstice. One of the most extravagant celebrations can be found in Sweden, where midsummer gatherings are celebrated with decor, dancing, food, and drinks. Perhaps such importance was placed on this time of year because of Sweden's high latitude on the globe, allowing what is known as the midnight sun, where daylight can be observed even in the middle of the night. The Swedish tradition of celebrating the longest day of the year is believed to have started in the 1500s as a pagan festival of fertility and light. These celebrations may have coincided with Vikings and sailors returning home from their voyages and mingling with the women for the first time in a while, and it became tradition to erect what is known as the maypole, which young women were meant to dance around in a circular motion. I'm sure you can figure out the symbolism there on your own. As with any ancient tradition, lore and folktales began to be associated with it. In one countryside community known as Horga, a song called Horgoliten was associated with the maypole dance. This song is based on a 1785 folktale about the devil disguised as a fiddler who possessed the young to dance and dance until they collapsed and died. Basically the earliest known version of that one Yeah 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 song. The midsummer celebration, the Horga, the maypole, and the Horgoliten are all real cultural phenomena, as you may have figured out if you're a fan of the Swedish metal band In Flames, who covered Horgoliten in 1994. But the cult scene in the 2019 movie, Midsummer, have certain traditions that don't reflect the real-life Horga, namely human sacrifice. In the movie, the dance has evolved into sort of a competition to crown the last dancer standing as the May Queen, and in 2019, one traumatized girl finds herself thrust into the festivities. To learn the entire history of the May Queen, which aspects of Swedish folklore are inspired from real life, and the meaning behind all the insanity that is Midsummer, stick around to the end of this video. Welcome to Horga History. Midsummer was directed by Ari Aster, fresh off the heels of his 2018 breakout film Hereditary, which also dealt with the world of pagan cults. According to Thrillist, Aster decided on Horga as the location for his sophomore movie primarily because he was inspired by the Horgoliten, even though he doesn't specifically use that song during the ceremony. It's always more fun to tether it to something tangible, Aster explains, but then, you know, you do run the risk of the real thing being confused for whatever you've done. And that's why I'm here to sort it all out. To understand the Horgan cult, we've got to take it back to this strange tradition centered around the Black One. It was here, long ago, that the Black One lured the youths of Horga to the grass and seduced them into dance. Once they began, they could not stop and danced themselves to death. Now, in life-holding defiance of the Black One, we dance until we fall, and she who survives last will be crowned for her stamina. This is the explanation given each year at the beginning of the May Queen ceremony. I would assume that the Black One is not talking about Josh, but rather the devil himself. In the traditional Swedish folk song, there are several clues to suggest that the fiddler is demonic. When he pulled out his fiddle, the people of Horga Morga got excited and forgot God and the whole world. Another verse describes the narrator noticing that the fiddler has a hoof, a common trait in many depictions of the devil. The song describes a sudden premature death for the dancers, and Midsommar begins with the sudden premature death of the protagonist's sister, Terry Arter, and her parents, due to intentional carbon monoxide poisoning. In her final email to her sister, Terry writes, "I can't anymore. Everything's black. Mom and Dad are coming too. Goodbye." And while this reads kind of like a Change the World meme, it's interesting that she describes everything as black, and I wonder if this could be referring to the black one. There's also the fact that Dani has a dream where black smoke billows from her mouth before seeing the image of her family replacing the deceased cultists at the bottom of the cliff. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The traditions of the Horgan cult were established long before over 9 days, as opposed to 6 in real life. The events in the film also take place during the special anniversary known as the Great Feast that only occurs every 90 years.
It has been 90 years since our last Great Feast, and it will be 90 years before our next.
In one scene, Mark it makes them see things, and they fall. Lol. This is another similarity to the cult in Hereditary, who used herbal tea to make their subjects more receptive to communication with spirits and demons. It's all there in my King Payman video, which you can watch later after you're done watching this video. For once in your life, finish what you started. When only one girl remains, everyone celebrates and she's crowned with an even more elaborate and colorful flower crown, then placed on a pedestal and paraded to the dinner table, where she sits at the flower throne at the head of the table. There, she's expected to eat a full salt herring whole for good luck. Pickled herring is a real traditional Swedish midsummer recipe, and it is said to be good luck, not just in Sweden, but in many Nordic countries. I think the idea of having to swallow it whole in front of everyone was probably invented for the movie, and I'll get into why a little bit later. After dinner, the May Queen is taken around on a chariot to bless the crops and livestock for the upcoming year. The torch is literally and figuratively passed to her, and she says a blessing over some freshly buried seeds, meats, and eggs. This is all very important in relation to the cult's beliefs, because they have accepted the idea of a circle of life. Since lives have just been sacrificed, the blessing to sprout new crops and birth new livestock is the next step in the cycle. Each midsummer, the process is repeated and a new queen is named. At some point in the 1900s, it became tradition to photograph the May Queen and display the photo by a window in the main house, where all of the younger ones, up to age 36, sleep. There are 30 photos shown in the year that Dani comes to Sweden, which I have no choice but to believe is 2019, the same the map.
Sport 24 af Danmark.
Få gratis hærdet glas med antirefleks.
He suspects Julia and spies on her. She follows Julia, taking a man to the attic for Frank's feeding, and interrupts him. Frank attempts to attack Kirsty, but she manages to escape with the puzzle. However, she collapses soon and wakes up in a hospital, where she solves the puzzle. Naturally, several Cenobites and a demonic creature called Engineer appear. The Cenobite leader named Pinhead tells Kirsty that they are simply explorers from another dimension looking for new forms of physical pleasure and can no longer differentiate between pain and pleasure. When they attempt to take Kirsty back to their realm, she tells them that Frank has escaped. Kirsty tries to trade Frank in return for her safety from the Cenobites. Meanwhile, Frank has killed Larry and wears Larry's skin. When Kirsty returned home, Frank and Julia attempted to kill Kirsty to complete Frank's rejuvenation, but Frank accidentally killed Julia. The Cenobites reappeared and took care of Frank for good this time. After tearing apart Frank, the Cenobites attempted to take Kirsty, but she managed to banish them back with the help of the puzzle box. The film ends with Kirsty throwing the box into a burning pyre and a winged skeletal entity taking away the box. The box finally reaches the Moroccan merchant who had sold it to Frank. With Hellraiser, writer and director Clive Barker gave birth to an entirely new stream of horror films. It was bizarre and grotesque, but was equally effective and horrifying. He presents the Cenobites as a peculiar blend between vampires and zombies, but these demonic beings remain way scarier than both zombies and vampires because they are not merely ruthless and mindless, but have a purpose and a goal. Despite being made with a budget of just under $1 million, the special effects, music, and grim theme of the sets added more worth to Hellraiser. Barker delivered a film that's dark, intense, and seriously horrific. Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, 1988. Frank had killed Larry and made Kirsty an orphan. Immediately after that, Kirsty was taken to a psychiatric hospital where she was admitted under the care of Dr. Channard and his assistant, Kyle McRae. Channard and Kyle were questioning Kirsty, and she told them that they should destroy the bloody mattress on which her stepmother Julia had died.
You have got have to destroy that mattress.
Unbeknownst to Kirsty, Dr. Channard is a man obsessed with the puzzle box or the Lamet configuration. After hearing Kirsty's story, he brings home the mattress and asks a mentally ill patient to lie down on it and slit himself with a razor. As the blood of the patient touched the mattress, Julia appeared from the dead in a skinless body. Kyle didn't believe Kirsty's story and was investigating the claims she made. He happened to witness the entire episode of Julia's resurrection, but was smart and quick enough to flee the scene. Julia seduces Channard, and he agrees to bring her more patients on whom she can feed and regenerate. Meanwhile, Kyle tells Kirsty that he believed her, and the two of them leave to stop Channard.
It's all true.
However, by now, Julia had fully renewed, and she kills Kyle while she knocks Kirsty unconscious. Channard and Julia abduct another patient named Tiffany, as she had an affinity for solving puzzles. They force her to solve the Lamet configuration. She does so, and they enter the labyrinth-like realm of Cenobites. Julia betrays Channard, and the god of the hellish realm, Leviathan, transforms him into a Cenobite. Meanwhile, Pinhead and other Cenobites find Kirsty,
otherwise known as the Paleolithic, and why they were created. So, grab a bevy, try to ignore the fact that I do look like the fifth member of the Beatles throughout the rest of this video, and please enjoy. Ooh. Oh god. Hello, chicken nugget. So I've already filmed an intro for this, but I did not like it, so I'm doing it again. Now, of Dolny Vestonis. I'm literally half Czech, so I should know how to say this, but you know. Some of the best known examples include the Venus of Willendorf, made of limestone and red ochre, the Venus of Dolny Vestonis. I'm literally half Czech, so I should know how to say this, but apparently I don't. Made from ceramics, one of the earliest examples of the use of ceramics, in fact. And of course, the oldest one, the Venus of Holfels, which dates to 40 to 35,000 years ago, give or take, you know, somewhere in that 5,000 year period. Most range from between about 2.5 centimeters to 10 centimeters long. They range in size and shape, as you can see. Now, swiftly moving on to the first theory of many for the purpose of Venus figurines. One of the first very Victorian and androcentric theories for the purpose of Venus figurines was that they were thought to be sexual objects for men, carved by men of the women around them. Archaeologist Olga Soffa has, however, warned against viewing the figurines in the same way that one may view 18th century Western European.
Den gode smag af Coca-Cola.
Awake, right?
Ny Sanex Shower Gel.
Det må du sgu undskylde. Det er bare en lille bitte ris. Jeg tror ikke, forsikringen dækker. Jeg giver den lige lidt ekstra. Sådan der.
Tillid er, at du kan nøjes med at give dit nummer.
Hvis du også har glædet dig til at...
Det er dyrt.
Endelig.
The more we learn about the world around Göbekli Tepe, filling in the vacuum that existed in the early 90s, the more incredible the tale becomes. However tempting it may be to speak of the serpent tempting Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, any such allusions to far later stories may well be entirely illusory. Quite simply, though many would beg to differ, with elaborate intellectual journeys of shamanic rituals and totemic creatures, for the most part, the images at Göbekli Tepe have lost their meaning. The intricate, often crowded gatherings of creatures, be they guardians, culture heroes, or symbolic representations to ensure hunting success, may well also be illustrated storytelling aids for fables once as famous as those we all know today, long before Adam and Eve. Often depicted with prominent penises. For some reason, unlike in early near-contemporary farming societies, the female form is almost never depicted. No clay, so-called Earth Mother figurines are to be found. Here, in a quite different culture to that of the South, at places like Jericho, the ferocious world of the hunters took precedent. In Enclosure C, where 3 concentric rings of walls were successively built up, one after the other over the years, gradually receding the size of the interior, feral pigs dominate. In this so-called House of the Boars, wild pigs bare their teeth menacingly. Another lies on its back, deceased perhaps. Almost all of the animals are male. Several depictions of human skulls are found too, ranging from the small to larger than life. Some also displaying prominent and erect penises. Unexplained holes, stepping stones, and small cups are found too, with suggestions being made of stands for small fires to light the enclosure during the night.
Afrika, Sverigedemokratisk bøsse.
Altså er accepteret. Så man forsøger på alle mulige måder at begrænse det her. Samtidig med, at det er noget, man godt ved, man ikke rigtig kan gå. Endnu et eksempel på, at det foregår det der med vinduesprostitutionen, og her afslutningsvis vil jeg lige læse det her citat op fra, som handler om det der blandt andet med, at
så den 13. maj 1792. Så hun bliver kun lige kort over 30 år, og vi kan følge hele hendes liv, fra hun er denne her unge, må vi også tro, flotte pige. Og da hun så kommer ud, der har hun det faktisk ikke særlig godt. Hun bliver behandlet for kønssygdomme igen. Og altså steder, hvor der enten er damer, eller hvor der er forskellige former for udskænkning. De røde, det er selvfølgelig de værste. Det er de steder, hvor der er kendte bordeller, og de gule er sådan udskænkningssteder. Og dem, hvor der både er rødt og gult, det er sådan, hvor der er lidt af hvert. Og som kunne have været sådan en lille dreng, der løb rundt og solgte viser. Ham giver de et par mønter, og så får de ham til at råbe, den nye vise om dronning Esther, når hun går forbi. Og så bliver hun altså rigtig super i handel, og har sådan en butik blandt andet med specialitet i spejle. Og i det her hjem, der vokser hun altså op. Hun har nogle søskende, 4 søskende, blandt andet denne her bror, der desværre kommer i tugthuset. Moren dør, da hun er med en advarsel. Så kommer vi frem til august 1783. 1700-tallet er på mange måder noget, man kunne kalde sådan ærekærhedens århundrede. Man er meget øm om sit ry og rygte, og det er Esther også. Hun
altså afsluttet i 21. En anden detalje, man også lige skal have med, det er, at Dagmar Overby begår drabene mange forskellige steder. Hun begår ikke drabene et sted, hun begår ikke drabene på Enghavevej, hvor det her billede er fra. Det er hendes soveværelse, hvor hun gemte nogle af barneligene, blandt andet i den der lille kuffert, der vi kan kalde det, som I ser. Og man lader som om, ja, det ikke er sket, kan man sige. Efter den her episode her, lader det til, at Dagmar Overby ligesom, det forværres, hendes forhold i familien forværres. Hun får flere konflikter med forældrene, og det hele fører til, at hun tager bort fra hjemmet af, og i den forbindelse så begår hun også et tyveri. Og derefter så melder faren hende til politiet, og hele den her sag fører til, at Dagmar Overby bliver fjernet fra hjemmet af og sendt på landet. På landet klarer hun sig tilsyneladende udmærket. Hun får udmærket skudsmål og klarer sig godt der, hvor hun er ude og tjene. Det er jo en interessant detalje. Det lader sig ved et godt sted, hun er ude at tjene, Dagmar Overby. Og hvis der er rimelig struktureret og ordnet forhold omkring Dagmar Overby, så ser det ud som om, at hun faktisk klarer sig ganske udmærket. Men af den ene eller den anden grund, jeg ved ikke helt hvorfor, så flytter Dagmar Overby fra det sted her, hvor hun ellers klarer sig udmærket, og kommer hen et andet sted. Og der kommer hun ind i endnu en tyverisag. Og det fører til, at hun må forlade stedet. Hun får også en dom for det her tyveri her. Og efterfølgende, så tager hun tilbage til Aarhus.
Øg dine chancer for. Prøv vores lækre, jeg vil. Ny Sanex Shower.
Hvor er min mobiltelefon? Altså de der skrig, jeg ved det.
Kræver dit næste gør.
Undgå. Lige nu kan du. Ny vitamin C serum, en højt koncentreret. Reducer synligt pigment. Der er intet bord. Der er intet. YouTube Premium.
Party.
Must always remain clean. Boy, something slow and painful, I assume, so you could watch, eh?
Stake to classify Lebensborn, which ran these children's homes, as a purely charitable organisation and acquit those involved of the charges. From today's point of view, that was a blatant judicial error.
There were precise guidelines on how a racially suitable child was supposed to look. 21 characteristics were examined, including growth patterns, the back of the head, the bridge of the nose, and body hair. The officials were looking for so-called Aryan types.
18. Prussia's might and glory were no more. It was all over for Kaiser, God, and fatherland. After 4 years of slaughter, 10 million soldiers lay dead.
Of the Chinese. This is their... Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters Plus here on Friday. France 9 Cat. I'm Mark Owen. In this edition, China's crackdown on the Muslim Uyghur minority. Human rights campaigners say that over 1 million people have been interned in concentration camps in the far west province of Xinjiang. According to Beijing, the official Chinese line on this is that the Uyghurs are voluntarily signing up to re-education programs. In reality, entire families are forced out of their homes, their houses left empty, and they disappear overnight. Our reporters Angelique Fauché and Antoine Vitt.
He bet his friend that he could get into your pants by noon tomorrow.
Is this your business? What are you, the morals police?
They have traveled to Xinjiang many times to film our special.
That sucks. It's my personality bites. He's cute with anything. He's a major piece of cake. Piece of pie. Trust me, okay? He's carrot cake. And when a guy like that, who's actually cuter than you, likes you, he's cuter than me. Oh, face it, son. No one's gonna ever go for you because your looks. That sucks. It's my personality bites.
Få et års glat. Få. Oplev den. Det er de lokale, der...
We have to take the good with the bad, don't we? That's what marriage is. So for you, maybe today is a bad day. Tomorrow may be great.
Tomorrow will be great.
Yeah. Today...
The mastermind to control the mastermind to the mastermind to the mastermind who controlled everything from the very beginning? I don't think so. I think Ari Aster put in a lot of details for the audience that aren't meant to be used as evidence that the cult was behind every little thing, like in Hereditary. In fact, there's an interview on HuffPost where Aster is questioned about the theory that Pell was responsible.
I think it's very good you're coming.
He starts to bring up how sorry he was to hear that Danny lost her parents, but she gets choked up and has to leave to compose herself in the bathroom. It feels like he has a thing for her, and he probably does, but he doesn't get a chance to explain why he's happy to have Danny specifically joining them on the trip. When Pell explains his homeland to Danny, he's the only one in the group that seems genuinely warm towards her.
You know, I'm very, very glad you're coming. I think it's very good you're coming.
He starts to bring up how sorry he was to hear that Danny lost her parents, but she gets choked up and has to leave to compose herself. She knows that something is wrong, much like how she knew there was an issue after receiving that email from her sister 6 months prior. Aster is drawing attention to the similarities between the two scenes. There's first a Testupa ritual, Danny looks nervous and uncomfortable. It's as if she knows that something is wrong, much like how she knew there was an issue after receiving that email from her sister 6 months prior. Aster is drawing attention to the similarities between the two. Yellow tea is brewed, the women are dressed in floral crowns, and Danny is given traditional clothing. The next step towards her integrating into the cult. They all join hands and circle around the maypole, and she gets very uncomfortable and sees grass growing out of her feet, just like when she took the mushrooms upon arriving in Sweden. Once this realization hits her, all she can do is smile.
That's not for us.
She ignores this advice and goes there anyways, looking distraught, almost as if she already knows what's going on inside. This is the third time we've seen her freak out before a tragedy, which serves to connect this with the death of her parents and her witnessing the Testupa. She looks into the keyhole and confirms her suspicions, but this time, unlike the previous two, she does not have Christian to dump her emotional baggage onto. Instead, her new family is there for her, and they all share the burden of her heartbreak together. The sound of her wailing is just like what we heard after she found out that her has affordable healthcare. Speaking of money, there's obviously not any legal tender in Horga, because the Horgans don't.
We should YouTube Premium er YouTube uden
who had followed Julia enchanted, and the Cenobites tell her that she was free to explore the realm. Kirsty finds Frank, who tells her that he impersonated her father and tricked her into dreaming that her father was in trouble. However, Julia saves Kirsty by killing Frank as revenge for killing her and consuming her body. But soon, Julia herself dies and only her skin is left behind. Channard, who is now a Cenobite, finds Kirsty and Tiffany while they were trying to escape, but Pinhead and the other Cenobites stop him from killing them. Although Channard overpowers the other Cenobites, Kirsty and Tiffany manage to escape and close the doorway to hell that the Lament configuration had opened. Clive Barker wrote the story for Hellbound, and the film takes heavily on the previous film, but the most critical element is the little backstory of Pinhead, who is actually a British military officer named Elliot Spencer.
My dear, sweet child, that's what I do. It's what I live for. To
What a lovely little bride I'll make, my dear, I'll look divine.
Who had followed Julia and Channard, and the Cenobites tell her that she was free to explore the realm. Kirsty finds Frank, who tells her that he impersonated her father and tricked her into dreaming that her father was in trouble. However, Julia saves Kirsty by killing Frank as revenge for killing her and consuming her body. But soon, Julia herself dies and only her skin is left behind. Channard, who is now
Good God, am I? You're over here like it's spring fucking break and I still don't have that billing report.